Usually, when we talk about people who have beautiful hair, we're not talking about males, right? Most of the yeah, most of the time we're talking about females, and your hair is so pretty and long flowing locks. But there's a really strange story, one that kind of makes you go, "What?" And there's a man with beautiful hair. So, Old Testament times, if you have a Bible, we'll turn there. We're going to be in kind of the middle of Second Samuel, chapter 14, a few chapters later too. So we know David. David's, king of Israel, leader of Israel, man after God's own heart, which is going to come up later in this lesson. But David has several children. One of those children is named Absalom. David loves his kids, loves his children, loves his family. But, as with all families, some families more than worse, I guess, or more than others, families have problems, and David has problems. One of these problems is with his son named Absalom. But here's where we start to read a little bit about Absalom. 2 Samuel 14, verse 25. In all Israel, there was no one so much to be praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he cut the hair of his head, for at the end of every year he used to cut it, when it was heavy on him, he cut it. He weighed the hair of his head 200 shekels by the king's weight. All right, so that's quite a few words to talk about a guy's hair, right? And most of the time in Bible, when we have a character, we don't really talk a whole lot about their hair. Samson may be the exclusion to that. But the greats, I don't know a whole lot about Abraham's hair or Isaac's or Jacob's or Moses' hair. I'm not sure about what their physical appearance was like, but I know a lot about Absalom, and that's going to come up a little bit later. So Absalom is the son of David and decides he's going to revolt against his father's kingdom. And David has to fight against this faction of people that's rising up against him. But David is adamant. I want to defeat the army. I want to make sure that, they're defeated and I'm victorious, but do not hurt my son, right? So, how does this play out?
So in chapter 18, we see that David has given this command to all of his generals, and he has given it in front of all the people that are going to war for him. And he wants them to know for sure, do not hurt Absalom. Well, as most of the stories go for God's side, God um, causes the battle to be fought in the woods, and that is a place where David is strong. That is a place where God can allow David's men to fight and be victorious. David's men are killing the thing, and they're doing really good, and they are coming victorious. And one of David's men finds Absalom, his son with the beautiful hair, hanging from a tree. It says that he is hanging between heaven and the earth, heaven and the ground, and he's stuck there. And that's the image I think that we get, is that he is hanging from his hair in this tree. Absalom, funny enough, rides a mule
Yeah.
into battle. I don't know, might be a good choice. I don't know a whole lot about mules or donkeys, but he rides a mule into battle, and he is stuck fleeing, basically. And so, there's a couple of interesting things here. David wants to go into this battle. David's men say, no, you're much too valuable. You are of more use to us in the city. If we need reinforcements, if we need backups, we don't want them to fight us differently because you're there. Absalom probably should have taken that same advice of the commander doesn't need to be there. And I think David wants to, because the last time he didn't go off to battle,
Right. Bad things happen.
bad things happen. And this is a direct result of that bad thing happening the last time David did not go to battle with his men. Um, so you've got Absalom hanging from this tree, probably by his hair. And you kind of had the irony of the one thing that he is known for, his beauty, his hair, is what's got him stuck.
Mm-hmm.
David's man doesn't want to kill Absalom. He's scared. He doesn't want to do it. But Joab is a man that says, why didn't you kill him? Why didn't you take him? I would have paid you 10,000 shekels to have finished him off. And then I would have promoted you in my army. All these things are happening. And he said, nah, David said, don't do it. I'm not going to do it. Well, Joab is the guy that goes and he does it.
Mhm.
So he throws 3 spears, center mass. That doesn't finish Absalom off. And so 10 men, Absalom had defiled himself with 10 of David's concubines, wasn't it?
Mhm.
And so 10 men finish him off, throw him in a ravine, cover him up, and leave him. That's kind of the story.
That's the story.
Yeah.
So I would pick up with that at the end of chapter 18. And this is kind of where, the story, I guess, kind of gets real. Absalom, the son, has died. David didn't want him to die. The commander, Joab, kills him anyway. And so they're reporting back. This is the end of chapter 18, verse 31. Behold, the Cushite and the Cushite came and said, the good news for my lord the king, for the Lord has delivered you this day from the hand of all who rose up against you, which is great news. And so the king said to the Cushite, is it well with the young man Absalom? That's his only concern. What's going on with my son? And the Cushite answered, may the enemies of the Lord king and all who rise up against you for evil be like that young man. And the king was deeply moved, that's David, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and he wept. And as he went, he said, oh, my son Absalom, my son, Absalom, would that I have died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son. And what struck me about this, and I'll end my part and then throw it to you, is this is a father who's experiencing grief over his child. His child has, gone a direction that he didn't want him to go and has met an end that he did not want him to meet. And this is the raw emotion of a dad who's upset about what's happened to his child. And I'm thinking David is a man after God's own heart. And so, there are times when that shows up with flying colors. There are times whenever you're thinking, how can this be a man after God's own heart? And he commits these kinds of sins and does these kind of actions. So, he's kind of a complex character. But here, I think you see very well why he's a man after God's own heart. His son has rebelled against him, has violated, his will, is just going a totally different direction than David wants him to go. But David still longs for him to be back and mourns whenever he does things that are contrary to what he should be doing. And I'm thinking that's the picture of God with us. I probably shouldn't be the main takeaway here, but it's what comes to my mind is, we all say and do things that we should not do and that God doesn't want us to do. But I'm thinking David, as a man after God's own heart, shows us the heart of God whenever we do those things, longs for us to come back, mourns whenever we do things we know good and well we should not be doing. And so I think it's a kind of a wake-up call for us to say, by the way that I live my life and the way that I'm doing things, what am I causing God to think? What am I causing, our Father to feel emotionally towards us?
Yeah. So we also see, I think, David, I think he realizes that he might be partly to blame for this. His parenting style might have led to some of this. It certainly supplied the right soil for this to be produced. David was an indulgent parent. This comes out of a relationship that David should have never had in the first place. David probably should have been more concerned with Israel than his son, who was a traitor. Mm-hmm. And that is the message that the Cushite gives to him was, may he be like everybody else that tries to come up against us. David probably is reminded about his sin with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah. And he is most likely going to reap the rewards of that. God told him, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house. 2 Samuel chapter 12. And so we see David kind of pay for some of those past sins. But I think also in David's cry, like you were saying, we hear the cry of God for his children to come back to him, for his lost children. His desire is to restore and to forgive. Right. And David wants nothing more than for Absalom to be brought back to his house. I think we see that same image played out in the story of the prodigal son, a son that has left the father, vowed him off, has taken his inheritance, basically claims that, you're dead to me, Dad, and then begs to come back. And I think David would have loved to have seen an Absalom that comes back repentant and sorrowful and to be restored. And I think we see that image played out through the Old Testament, the New Testament, and eventually with us as God's children to be called back.
That's it.
That's it in a nutshell.
All right.
Hope you have a great week. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday.